All right, welcome in everyone to another deep dive.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
Today we're going to be talking about computers and technology and, how it seems like things just keep changing faster and faster.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's not just, if you're like really into tech, it's like if you're just a regular person trying to keep up,
Right.
it can be really overwhelming.
So I think a lot of our listeners probably feel that way. They're curious about where things are headed and maybe how to navigate all this new technology, or, maybe they just want to know what kind of impact all this is having on our lives.
Right? It's such a huge part of our lives now, and it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger.
And the crazy thing is this stuff is changing all the time. So by the time we're done with this deep dive, there's probably going to be something new to talk about.
Probably, yeah.
So for this deep dive, we've got a couple of really interesting sources.
Oh yeah, this is a good combo.
We've got a conversation between a customer and a computer salesperson, and it's like a real, slice of life look at what's going on in the tech world. And we've also got this like informational piece that gives us like a broader historical perspective on computers, like where they came from and how they've changed.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how those two connect.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so basically our goal today is to kind of look at those sources and figure out, what are the key takeaways about how fast this stuff is changing, and also try to make sense of some of that, you know, tech jargon that gets thrown around all the time, because it can really feel like a foreign language sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, even for me, sometimes I'm like, wait, what are they talking about?
And in the end, we want to really understand like how computers have transformed our lives and where they might be taking us in the future.
Yeah, because it's already been such a wild ride.
All right, so let's jump right in with that customer interaction.
Yeah, so what really struck me about this conversation was just like the sense of frustration from the customer. They've got this computer, it's only 3 years old, and already they're being told it's basically ancient history.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how quickly things become obsolete these days.
Well, and that's a really key word there, obsolete. The salesperson actually mentions that technology is becoming obsolete at an accelerating rate. And it's important to remember that in tech, obsolete doesn't just mean something is old or unused.
Hmm.
It means something has been replaced by something so much better that the old thing is basically useless.
Right, like you could try to use a rotary phone today, but why would you?
Exactly.
It's not just that it's old-fashioned, it's that it just doesn't work as well as a modern phone.
And our source actually gives us a really interesting analogy for this. Outside the world of tech, they talk about how words can become obsolete too. Like, think about words like lie and thine.
Oh yeah, like Shakespearean English.
Yeah, those words were totally normal once upon a time, but
Yeah.
nobody really uses them anymore except in very specific contexts.
Yeah, it's like they've been outpaced by newer words.
And that's kind of what's happening with technology too. Older versions are constantly being replaced by newer, more powerful versions,
Yeah.
and this whole cycle of obsolescence, it's partly driven by innovation, but it also has this kind of consumerist element to it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because the tech companies are always trying to convince us that we need the latest and greatest gadget, even if the one we have is still working perfectly fine.
Right, it's like trying to play a brand new video game on a console from 20 years ago.
Hmm.
It might technically work, but the experience is going to be so bad that it's basically pointless.
Totally. And of course, in this conversation, we see that classic sales tactic, the upsell. The customer just wants to know why their computer is running slow, and the salesperson is already steering them towards a brand new top of the line model.
Oh yeah, that's so relatable. Like we've all been there, haven't we?
Definitely. And that's where the salesperson starts throwing around all these technical specifications.
And that's where it gets really confusing for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. The customer even says something like, I have no idea what you were talking about, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, so let's try to break down some of that jargon for our listeners.
Okay, let's do it.
So the salesperson mentions things like a 4 gigahertz processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 1 terabyte hard disk.
Yeah, lots of numbers and big words.
So let's start with those prefixes mega, giga, and tera.
Okay, so this is all about like the size of things, right?
Exactly. And our source actually explains it really well. They say mega is the smallest, then giga, then tera is the largest.
Okay, so it's like a ladder.
Right. And think of this in terms of like digital storage space, like on your hard drive for all your files and photos and videos.
Okay, so like a terabyte hard drive would have a lot more space than a gigabyte hard drive.
Way more. A terabyte can hold like hundreds of movies.
Wow, it's a lot of movies.
It is a lot of movies. And it's interesting to think about how those units of measurement have changed over time. Like we started with kilobytes, Then megabytes were like a huge deal. Then gigabytes became the norm. And now terabytes are becoming more and more common, especially with 4K video and stuff.
Yeah, those files are huge.
Okay, so now let's talk about that 4 gigahertz processor. The processor is basically the brain of your computer. It's the thing that does all the calculations and runs all the programs.
Okay, so it's like the most important part of the computer.
Pretty much. And the gigahertz refers to the clock speed, which is basically how many calculations the processor can do per second.
So a higher gigahertz number means a faster processor.
Exactly. And that's probably why the customer's computer is running slow. They need a faster processor.
Makes sense. And then there's that 16 gigabytes of RAM. What's RAM all about?
So RAM stands for random access memory.
Mhm.
And it's basically like the computer's short-term memory. It's where the computer stores the data that it's actively working on.
So it's like a workspace.
Exactly. The more RAM you have, the more things your computer can do at the same time without slowing down.
Okay, so if you're someone who likes to have like a million tabs open at once.
Then you need a lot of RAM.
Gotcha.
And speaking of computers slowing down, the customer also mentions that their computer is constantly crashing or freezing.
Ugh, the dreaded freeze.
And our source explains that freezing means the computer basically becomes unresponsive. Like the cursor won't move, nothing happens when you click, it's totally stuck.
And it's the worst, especially if you haven't saved your work.
Oh yeah, you could lose hours of work.
And usually you have to just like restart the whole computer.
And that's when the salesperson swoops in with the top-of-the-line new model.
Like, here's the solution to all your problems.
Right, and the source defines top-of-the-line as the best model currently available, like the highest quality, significantly better than average.
Okay, so it's like the BMW of computers.
Exactly, and you might hear that phrase used for other things too, like cars or appliances, but usually not for things like food or art.
Right, it's got to be something that's mass-produced.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about that customer interaction, but let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture of how computers have changed our lives.
Yeah, because it's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
And our informational source does a really good job of taking us through that history.
It's amazing to think about what life was like before computers.
I know, right? Like imagine a world without the internet or smartphones.
Or even just like word processing, like writing everything by hand.
Ugh, can you imagine?
I would have such bad hand cramps.
So the source tells us that the earliest computers were invented in the mid-20th century, and they were these huge machines that took up entire rooms.
Like those old sci-fi movies.
Exactly, and they were super slow and expensive, so only like big organizations and universities could afford them.
But then they started getting smaller and faster, right?
Right, and more affordable, and that's what led to the personal computer revolution in the 70s and 80s. Suddenly, regular people could have computers in their homes.
And that's when things really started to change.
Totally. People started using computers for all sorts of things, like writing documents, playing games, learning new things.
And the source points out that a lot of this was thanks to people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates.
Yeah, they were really instrumental in making computers more user-friendly.
Like making them something that anyone could use, not just like computer scientists.
And then came the 90s and the internet.
The world was never the same.
The source describes the internet as an interconnected network linking computers globally. And that's exactly what it is.
It's like this giant web connecting everyone.
And suddenly information was available at our fingertips.
Like we could find out anything we wanted to know in seconds.
And email made it so much easier to stay in touch with people far away.
So much faster than sending letters.
And our source even mentions the early search engines like Google and Yahoo and the rise of Wikipedia.
Oh yeah, those are game changers.
Suddenly, instead of going to the library to do research, we could just search for it online.
So much more convenient.
And then came the smartphone era.
Which is basically where we are now.
Right around 2007, the iPhone came out. And suddenly we had a powerful computer in our pockets.
And it wasn't just about making calls anymore.
Right, we could access the internet, take pictures, send messages, all from this one little device.
And then came the apps.
Oh, yeah, the apps changed everything.
Suddenly our phones could do like a million different things.
And our source specifically mentions language learning apps like Duolingo.
Which is pretty relevant to our audience.
Totally, because technology has really democratized language learning.
Like you don't need to go to a fancy language school anymore. You can just download an app.
And you can connect with native speakers from all over the world.
It's pretty amazing.
And speaking of amazing, our source ends by talking about the future of computers and artificial intelligence.
AI, that's the next big thing.
It is. And the source defines AI as basically computers that can think and learn like humans.
Which is kind of scary, but also really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the things AI could do. It could help us work faster, detect diseases earlier, teach us more effectively.
And the source even mentions like self-driving cars and smart homes.
Like the possibilities are endless.
And a little bit overwhelming.
But the source makes a really important point. They say that learning about technology is becoming as important as reading and writing.
Because it's going to be such a big part of our lives.
Exactly. So if we want to succeed in the future, we need to be tech savvy.
We can't just ignore it anymore.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, first of all, technology is always changing.
Like constantly.
So we have to be prepared to adapt and learn new things all the time.
And second, even though all that technical jargon can be confusing, it's worth trying to understand at least the basics.
Like things like processor speed and RAM and storage space.
Because that knowledge can really empower us as consumers.
So we don't get bamboozled by salespeople.
And finally, we have to acknowledge just how much computers have already changed our lives.
Like in pretty much every way imaginable.
From how we communicate to how we learn to how we work.
It's hard to imagine life without computers now.
So we hope this deep dive has been helpful and informative.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
And before we go, we want to leave you with a final thought.
A little something to ponder.
Given how fast technology is changing, what do you think the future holds?
Like what new skills will we need to learn?
And what new technologies will emerge?
And what technologies that we use every day now will become obsolete?
It's definitely something to think about.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
We'll see you next time.